Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. We'll be discussing the third verse of the Tao Te Ching today as it relates to our recovery right now. Good to have a number of folks today. We've got Brian and Bish and Tina and Paul and Lou and Drew at this moment. Good to have you guys and lady. One book I want to discuss before we get to the Tao Te Ching is a book by Rodney Smith, and I found out about this book through my Zen study group. It's called Stepping Out of Self-Deception, Rodney Smith. I enjoyed this book on Audible so much that I went back and bought the book, and now I'm sitting down and reading the book, with the audio, and the audio helps me to stay centered. So I'll listen to the book while I read it, stop and take notes. It's that good of a book for me. Stepping Out of Self-Deception, Rodney Smith. I have it in the bookstore. Any other announcements, go to buddyc.org. Got a lot of good resources there that you can take advantage of. If you're listening to this podcast and you'd like to join us, you can email me at info@buddyc.org, or better yet, you can go join us at our Facebook group, Tao of Our Understanding. It's a private group, so folks outside of the group would not know that you were a member. We try to maintain anonymity as much as possible with everything. So that's a good resource. Third verse of the Tao Te Ching. Anyone have a particular translation they'd like to read? I'll go ahead and read the Stephen Mitchell. And then if you guys have another one, or we can just use that as a base, however it unfolds. This third verse, Stephen Mitchell: if you overesteem great men, people become powerless. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. The master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores, by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. He helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think they know. Practice non-doing, and everything will fall into place. If you have comments and I miss your, and I don't notice you, just raise your virtual hand, please. We've got enough folks to where we'd start stepping on people if we just started talking outright. So let's do that, and I'll address you. Any opening thoughts with that or other translations? What's the guy that you like, Brian? Brian T. Isn't there a guy you?
Yeah, I like the Jeff Pepper Tao Te Ching in clear English. It says, "Don't honor good men, and the people will not strive. Don't value rare goods, and the people will not steal. Don't show off valuables, and the people's hearts will not be confused. Thus, the wise ruler empties minds and fills stomachs, weakens ambitions and strengthens bones. Make sure the people have no knowledge and no desire. Those who have knowledge will not dare to act. Do without doing, and all will be peaceful."
We'll eventually get to that last phrase, but let's start with that first one and just work our way through. Any other translations, guys, before we just dig in? This one can be this is a little tough. This is not the last little verse is good, and the rest of it, let's just see what we can pick out. And you guys that are new in here, I take all these spaces out. So if we've got pauses, don't think we've got to fill it, because you'll never know it on the podcast.
The overvaluing possessions part definitely stood out to me. I remember when I was looking at this for the first time, years ago, about, I think I'd read a story about, a painting. It was worth, I don't know, who knows, it was a Van Gogh that nobody knew was a Van Gogh, and it was just sitting out somewhere, and, people walked by it all the time, had no idea. I think it was in an office or something. And then somebody realized what it was, and immediately, put it behind big glass case and insured it and stored it and all that. to guard against people stealing it, because all of a sudden everybody knew how valuable it was. So, it went from this just, nice piece of art that people walk by and appreciate to this thing that was extremely, extremely valuable. Everybody wanted to steal, and now it's put it behind a big glass case. It's restricted, all those sorts of things. And, if people didn't want it so bad just because of who painted it, nobody would want to steal it. It could live just out in the open. People could appreciate it. But because everybody places so much value on it because of how much, somebody else is willing to pay for it, people want to take it. So that, I remember that stood out to me originally. If I can just kind of let objects be what they are, not put too much value on them, then I can let them come, let them go. I'm not going to be looking at what else I can take. Is this more valuable than that? Does this person have something I want? Do I have something they want? Do I need to buy insurance for this thing I have? Spend more money on something that I don't need to do that to.
Yeah.
So just kind of living more simply and just kind of letting things be. That's kind of what I took from that.
Maybe back to those perceptions too,
Mm-hmm.
because our attitude around things that we overvalue is so different than being right-sized about everything. Here's Jonathan Starr on that first stanza. Putting a value on status will cause people to compete. That's what you're talking about, I think. Hoarding treasure will turn them into thieves. Showing off possessions will disturb their daily lives. It goes back to that, what's that old proverb that when you build walls, you invite thieves?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm out in the country and I see that huge fancy gate, but I can't see anything behind it, guess what? I know there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like it'd be a lot better off just having an old cow gate up, an old fence gate instead. But when I see that, I'm like, oh, there's something back there that, must be valuable.
Yeah, there's one there's one house in our neighborhood like that. My neighborhood's got a bunch of 100-year-old craftsman houses, just little houses and small fences, nothing big. But one guy got a little plot of land in our neighborhood and built it looks like a fortress. I mean, it really does. It's got a huge fence around it. It's got 2 turrets. I mean, it's extremely closed off. We all have nice front porches that are really inviting, and he doesn't. There's a gate to go into the front yard. There's another gate to go onto the little landing where you can go into the big, heavy front door. And I had that. I was like, what does he have back there? What's he, and the house is more than twice as big as our house is. What does he need all this room for? What does he need all this security for? What's he got? And I'm sure other people who come into the neighborhood, especially if anybody comes in the neighborhood looking for, something to take, they're going to be really interested in his house.
How does this play into if we did a personal application of that first stanza, how would that apply to us? Everything's spiritual. We think there's an aspect of our life that's spiritual and the rest that's not. But, if y'all found what I have, that in reality, everything's spiritual. How do we live in life putting up those fancy gates what are we trying to protect behind that gate, so to speak? There's a lot of introspection you can do with that. Am I pretending here? Is there something to pretend or am I overvaluing? Tina?
When I think about this first part, and how it applies to my life, I go back and forth, like what we were talking about, I think last week about stuff. And I was thinking a lot about our discussion this past week. And I was thinking, where where the Tao seems very literal. I mean, that's why I love it. But like you said, buddy, you know, stuff doesn't have to be stuff. It can be old ideas or ways of thinking. That really helped when you said that, because, you know, I'm going through a thing right now where my stuff is blocking the sunlight of the spirit, or it's preventing me from being the fullest person I can be. And that's when I realized I'm overvaluing possessions. And I have just started, I mean, everyone knows of a grandma garage full of crap. Well, I already have a grandma garage full of crap. And I shouldn't have that much. We're giving it away. We're just, there's nothing I'm going to be able to get to in this lifetime that's going to give me peace in my heart. But I was wondering, so for me, it's a very literal thing, these readings, because I'm going through that process of not buying anything and giving away the things I have, I want more spirituality in my life. And those are the things that clog that up for me. So I guess, so my question is, it can be literal, but also it can be, you know, a different meaning. And I like the way that the Tao will say, this is what the people should do, when really I turn that around and think this is what I should be doing. But it's in such a nice, subtle way of saying it. It's like, yeah, they should. And then a little bit later, I'll say, wait, I should. So that's what I got.
Thank you, Tina. That's good. Lou?
When you said that everything's spiritual, it got me thinking about the bestowing of honors and prizes, and I thought about it in terms of myself. And, you know, think of the resume and all the stuff you put out there about how great you are, and those kinds of things. So I think there's a tendency to, in our culture, to hype that kind of stuff. You know, one of the first things people usually ask you is, "What do you do?" And then you talk about how these wonderful things that you're doing. And what I've found is when you run into somebody that not only doesn't blow their own horn, but kind of keeps back from that and is reserved in terms of their accomplishments and those kinds of things, they're the people I tend to want to pay more attention to. They're the ones that don't have to shout from the rooftops how great they are, and removes all of that from that arena of honors and attention and adulation and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Lou. That's good. Brian?
Yeah, to me, all this, this speaks to humility and, my ego. For a long time, I put up this facade, and I was that guy that if I had that house on the other side of the hill with the gate, that then I could prove to everybody that I was okay, and that I made it, and that I don't need y'all. And I probably would have walled myself off as well. And, that's, when I read this verse the other day, that was one of the things that I thought about, because for so long I would use stuff, to put up that image that I was okay. And it does not, you can't fill the hole in your soul with stuff. No amount of money fixes that. And, I believe it was Lou said something about people that don't speak much. I've got a friend that's very successful in business, and he's one of these guys that I've gotten to know over probably 10 years in recovery, and there's things that he says, and I'm thinking, I get little snippets here and there about his business, and I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me, is what I'm thinking, But then again, he's told me before, he says, man, I don't want to draw any attention to myself. And he's just, if you saw him in Walmart, he's just an ordinary dude. And I really admire that about him. He doesn't let many people in. He does a lot of things behind the scenes. And I really admire that. And I've tried to be that guy. I actually worked for I guess I can say it. I worked for UPS for a couple of years. I was considering a career change and didn't work out, moved on. And So one day the UPS truck comes screaming down my driveway or down the street. And he stops at the end of my drive and he hollers and says, "Hey, I know you." And I couldn't remember the guy's name, and I recognized his face. And so I walked down there, and he wasn't hollering from the other side of the gate. So let's clarify that. But and I walked up and I was talking to him, and emotionally, I really wasn't doing that well that day. And he says, well, how are you doing? He says, "Man, looking around, I'd say you're doing pretty darn good." And I thought, it just really hit me when he said that. I mean, it made me be grateful for what I have. But at the same time, and that day I was kind of struggling with that comparison and that gnawing desire to be that guy that lives down the road from me, that has the gate, that the house is on hundreds of acres. So this is a good verse for me. Thanks.
That discontent, Brian, I think is what you're talking about, right?
Discontent. It's a bottomless pit for me. Thank you.
It goes to those expectations too. I've been meditating a lot on expectation, how they steal everything. Drew.
I just what Brian said about his friend who just kind of goes out in the world with the confidence to just be himself and not need to wear a $20,000 watch to show people, how much money he's got, or, dress in the nicest clothes, or only go to the nicest places. I know people who wouldn't dare set foot on Walmart property, and I'm serious about that. We've got, I know people who wouldn't set foot in certain restaurants, who wouldn't dare be seen in these places because they're just so afraid of what people would think of them, for being in these places. And then, got friends on the other side of the spectrum who, like Brian's friend, they could be doing all that, and instead they're just walking around with the confidence to be who they are and meet people where they are, and hey, this restaurant looks pretty good. Let's go in there. I heard it's got really good food. And those types of people are really good influences to me. The ones who just, not only are okay with it, but kind of seek out, like a lot of the metaphors about water, seeking out the low places. That's, I like that metaphor a lot. And, if you can be like water and be happy anywhere, and be happier in the places where a lot of people wouldn't be happy, there's a lot of peace that comes with that.
Thank you, Drew. Bish.
So I know it's probably been talked about many times on the podcast, but it kind of blows me away that this book was written, a long time ago on the other side of the world, and yet it has so many applications to today, here and now in the West. It's hard for me to just look at it and go, "Oh yeah, no, this wasn't just written yesterday," right? The first part of this smacks of the desires, the wanting me to be better than others, wanting me to have more than others, and the materialism of today's society in the West. It really shines a magnifying glass on all this, right? If I can not compare myself to other people, I don't end up getting jealous, and these whole interpersonal conflicts just disappear. And if I don't lust after material things for the sake of the material things, I don't end up being like this fantasy world dragon, hoarding all my treasures for their mind, right? And at the same time, those kinds of things open us up to susceptibility to modern marketing, where we're just inundated with, oh, buy this, get that. Your life would be better if you only had this, and you're not satisfied, but gee, if you just had this one topical cream, like your skin would be better and the world would be better. And, and I feel like corporations and individuals would not take advantage of that kind of thing if we as individuals and as a society could just kind of lean back and not desire, not crave, not want next thing, because we're never satisfied, right? I never end up satiated as a result of any kind of purchasing, right? I never really end up getting what I want. And again, it just I'm just shocked that of the applicability daily here and now for such an old book. So anyway, that's all I got.
Thanks, Bish. Yeah, isn't that the human condition for me, is that if I'm not fit spiritually, I'm always looking at these things outside as a way to give me what can only come from within. And I think I've realized with my addiction that I may always crave to be different. I don't know, for things to be different than they are. That hasn't really left, which I thought it would over time. I've been sober 14 years, 14 and a half. So I thought by now I wouldn't desire things to be different, but there's still some of that to surrender. And I still like things to be different. I like it when my team wins, or I like it when this or that. Is my day going to be better because of a ball game? I don't know, those kind of things. When the ball game's over and the Braves have won, I'm happier than when they've lost. I'm like, why is that? Why would I allow a game that makes no difference whatsoever to affect the way, that I feel? That's just crazy that I would even consider doing that. But yet that's what happens all the time, Drew.
Yeah, I'm a huge sports fan, have been all my life. So yeah, that metaphor hits home with me, especially because I'm a huge fan of teams that are that have been really frustrating for a long time. So I feel you on that. But I think it's a healthy enjoyment until you turn it into an unhealthy obsession. If you're disappointed, if I'm disappointed that Team X lost on Sunday, at the last minute or whatever, I'm fine with that. But if I'm still upset about it, an hour later, or if I let it affect, how I drive, I'm angrier because my team lost. I read a couple of years ago, a study found that when a professional football team loses in a city, rates of domestic violence go up by a couple of percent. It's not nothing, but it is statistically noticeable. And I like when my team wins, but if I ever get to a place where when my team loses, I hurt somebody, especially somebody I love, that's too much. But yeah, I think there's healthy sports fandom. I kind of think there's innate tribalism that will never get out of the human brain, and that's of all the ways to let yourself feel a little bit of that tribalism that your brain just really wants to feel. A little bit of sports here and there. I think that's a little healthy diversion for me. Just kind of got to watch until it gets obsessive, or till I start letting emotions take control of me for it.
Thank you, Drew. That's good. Luke.
Well, first of all, it's good to hear that Drew is a Detroit Lions fan, like I am, about losing teams all the time.
That puts me in perspective. You're right.
I'm a sports fan too, and would get bummed when my team lost, which was a lot at the time, and maybe that's why I'm not so much that way anymore. But what's helped me, I think, in that is I have grandkids that play, and when you're watching little kids play, you see the development, you see the joy they have, and I find myself rooting for the other team as much as I am for my grandson or granddaughter's team because they're having the joy of the moment. And I guess that's the way I feel about it. If you could, it's like, watching an eagle soar or something, if you can delight in it, but then not despair in it. I think there's things to be said for delighting in things, a positive feeling of it, although, you don't want to depend on it or get caught up in it, but when you see it, to delight in it. And that's what's helped me. And so when I watched the Tigers on their 9-game or 10-game losing streak, I still got some enjoyment out of some good plays by either team. But I was a little happier when they won the last couple of games against the Twins, but still working on that.
Yeah, Lou, that's I just noticed how I felt a little different, and it was like, it wasn't something major. I didn't go, kicking the dog around the house because of it or nothing like that. But, I just noticed I felt a little different. And I'm like, why is that? So I'm still digging into that a little more. Second stanza. Let's move on because we're running. Actually, we talked a lot more about the first one than I thought we would. The master leads by emptying people's minds, filling their bellies, weakening their ambitions, and making them become strong, preferring simplicity and freedom from desires, avoiding the pitfalls of knowledge and wrong action. Jonathan Starr, thus the sage rules by stilling minds and opening hearts, then filling bellies and strengthening bones. The Chinese in that, the original could make that interpreted as by giving people a backbone. So he stills their mind, opens their heart, and gives them a backbone. He shows them how to be simple and live without desire. What we're talking about in the first stanza, to be content and not look for other ways with the people so pure who could trick them. What clever ideas could lead them astray? Drew.
This section always gave me a little trouble. I think one reason is because it comes so early in the book. The way I've always looked at it is, almost a command to me. Drew needs to go out and empty people's minds, fill their cores, go out and weaken people's ambition, go out, toughen people's resolve, go out, create confusion. Okay, how do I do that? When do I do that? When is appropriate to do that? When is not? But I think what Tina talked about earlier really helped me with this right now. Applying this to myself, this rather than seeing this as a command, to be fulfilled for other people. Because I've just always kind of thought that when I looked at this portion, how do I go out and create confusion? That doesn't seem, if I just go out with the goal of creating confusion in people, that doesn't seem like a good means to an end. But looking at this as something to apply to myself, like Tina was saying, I think that's a lot more helpful.
Thank you, Drew. Bish.
Oops. Okay. I completely agree, Drew. This struck me as not so much how to enforce my will on others as much as it is how to behave, right? And the whole emptying of the mind is freeing myself of ego and attachment, and the filling of the belly could be thought of as the breath, right? The filling the belly full of breath in meditation, and then the weakening of the wills is getting rid of my desire to impose what I want on you or the world. And then I don't know about the strengthening the bones. That always kind of left me scratching my head. So I feel like a couple of things here. First, I'm probably totally overanalyzing this, which as we go into like the very last bit of it, will kind of make it seem rather funny. But the strengthening the bones just kind of breaks down the whole Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Had a friend of mine that he'd been successful in business. He decided to buy him a Maserati. And we're in rural Georgia, okay? Not rural, but not quite urban, that in between town of 20,000 or so, just in between. So he bought him a Maserati, and he's in program long time. And he sold it. I said, why'd you sell your car? Like in no time, like within weeks. He said, he says, everyone looked at me differently. And I looked at everyone else differently. And people would make comments about my car, and they would, like they were sizing me up because of what I drove. He says, and I did not like it. So he ended up selling it because he didn't like the way that other people looked at him. And I think more than that, he didn't like the way he felt in it toward other people. That was interesting, and speaks some to that inward change we're talking about here, not relying on those externals to try to make us happy in any way. And in this second stanza too, it sounds like the tasks that the master is completing are not good. If you thought about it, that really wouldn't be the way that you would want to look at things. It's kind of paradoxical when you think about it. You say, okay, I'm going to empty their mind. I'm going to weaken ambition. I'm going to help people lose what they have. That just doesn't sound quite like what you would really, I would never pray for that for me, right? Weaken my ambition. I want to lose everything I have. And it says it creates confusion in those who think that they know. So we want to reverse this. It goes back to that same AA quote that we're afraid of losing something that we have or not get something that we want. What is that? 12 and 12, 10th, I believe. The spiritual axiom that every time I'm disturbed, here it is, page 90 in the step 10 in the 12 and 12. There's a spiritual axiom that every time that we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, that's not the one I wanted, but that's good. There's something wrong with us. The priority is getting undisturbed rather than getting even. That's a Sandy Beach quote. Anyway, we'll just stay with that. Emptying minds. This is what's accomplished. Stilling minds, being still and opening hearts. If you've ever had difficulty with someone, let's say there's someone you have a resentment against. If someone comes to mind that you may be dealing with a resentment, just take a second and just verbally say, I'm opening my heart to whoever. If I do that, I feel better. I don't know why that works. I send love to blank. How can I be of help to blank? That opening up of our heart is does much more for me than what I thought it would do. Tina?
Thank you for reading that out of the 12 by 12. I was just looking at this last night. I actually, something I need to talk about real quick. I'm getting ready to go make my probably first amend to my sister today at lunch. And I'm very nervous. This has been my hardest one. I didn't want to do the easy ones first. I want to do the hardest one, which has taken me a long time to get there. But so that's where I'm headed today. And I really needed to hear that. But something that I read was speaking about these stuff 9. But if we had prepared ourselves well in advance, such reactions will not defeat us from our steady and even purpose. And I think that steady and even purpose is what the second verse is talking about with the weakening ambitions. Because left to my own devices, my ambitions are very self-serving and ego-driven, and what's it going to make me look like? I have big problems with that as well. Our intentions, even though they can be good, once we get under the spell of consumerism and everything that people have brought up, societal, what the society tells you need, they prey on our weakness. That's how they make money. And no one makes money by building each other up and building up our spiritual life and it's a really hard thing, I guess, to do. So I want to commend you all for being here, working on your spiritual life right now. I was just at a big function for all of our employees. We had about 150 people there. And I had so many people come up to me and say, so what do you do? And I stay home. And it was a really tough night for me because there's all these people working for us very hard. And I'm like, oh, finally at the end, I said, I'm on a spiritual journey trying to stay. I quit drinking in 2014, and it's been a continual everyday process. And that's what I do. I stay sober. I go to meetings. I try to help other people. But, it was a special person that asked. I knew I could say that to. The first 7 people, I just said, I stay home with the boys, because you don't feel like you can just be yourself like I can in front of you guys. So that's a really hard thing for me to do, being out in the world where everyone is under that lens of, look at me, look at what I have. What do you have? What do you do? So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, dear. Let's move on to this last little stanza, because this is the answer in the way I read it. Now, before that, though, he says in the last little bit of that second stanza, with people so pure, who could trick them? What clever ideas would lead them astray? Now, when the action is pure and selfless, everything settles into its own perfect place. Or when we practice non-doing, everything will fall into place. That's the Wu way that we talk about, the effortless effort. Effortless effort is not, when I would first read that in the beginning, I would think, well, that's about doing nothing. How is that going to work? I've got to do something. But it's not talking about no effort. It's talking about a different kind of effort. It's still effort. It's still work. Actually, for me, it's more difficult work than what I would prefer to do. It's funny. Okay, think about this. I used to think I was satisfied. My energy I put towards something was in itself would pacify my fear that things were going to work a particular way. Let's say business was down and I needed more business. So if I got out there and hustled really hard, I would have confidence that what I was doing would help things to work out. Did not give me time to think about things. I just got busy working, in other words. And what this is saying is that our efforts should be in a different direction than what they have in the past. So I think that's the difference. It's coming from a place of selflessness, when in the past my efforts were always from a pure state of self. My ass was on fire and I was doing something to put it out. That's really the way I felt about that. So this is a whole shift in our thinking, isn't it? In our motivation. Drew?
Yeah, you mentioning your friend with the Maserati. I thought of that with this because I needed to buy a new car last year, and not doing literally would be me not buying a car, and
Right.
that wasn't practical for me. So I needed to do something, which would literally go against not doing. But like you were saying, it's how you go about the action you need to take. It's what you take into account when you're making the decision. And if I had based my decisions on, what are people going to think of me when I drive this car around, or, when I show up to this reunion or this, event with people who I really want to impress, and they see me get out of a car, what kind of a car do I want them to see me get out of? And, what are other people driving? What's the hottest thing? What's the nicest thing? That would not have led me to make a good decision at all. I just found, buddy, I think you and I talked about, we bought pretty much the exact same Camry. It's a good car. I looked it up. I got a great deal on it. It is not the kind of car that my colleagues drive, that, a lot of people around here drive. And, I don't care. it costs a heck of a lot less than those other cars. I'm really happy with it, and I'm not scared if somebody dings the door or something. It's it's a car. It gets me from point A to point B. It's got a couple things in it that I like, and I just I think that was a good example of me kind of putting the not doing into practice by looking for something with the right intention and going about it the right way. And I'm really happy with it. I don't think about my car other than when I get in it, and even when I get in it, I'm not thinking about it, just using it.
Yeah. Thank you, Drew. Brian.
For me, so much of it is about just when I can feel that anxiety building, and I'm self-employed as well, and for me it's about pumping the brakes, even if it means sitting with something overnight, or mulling it over for a couple of days or however long it takes. It's like I can feel that energy, and it's like I feel like I'm paddling upstream. And I just have to think about it, and just in my heart take what I think is that next, like they say in recovery, that next right indicated step, and just let go. For me, I would quote jobs, and if I didn't hear something back in an hour, I was just a mess. And we're talking about large corporations that the wheels turn slow. They operate on their own schedule. And I've started a practice that I'll send a quote. I'll wait at least a day, and I'll send an email, and I'll say, do you need any, can I provide you with any additional information? And I just let go of it. And it is hard as hell to let go, depending on where I'm at, because I can immediately go into this is my last freaking dollar and I've got to make it, but which is not the case. But it can be tough, especially when you have friends in business and you stop by and they're like, man, you're not going to believe what happened this afternoon. This guy walked in with a huge order and just dumped it on my desk, and I'm just like, man, that's great. I'm happy for you. And that's one of Buddy's tools. And I'm just like, man, I am so happy for you, and there is some truth to that. It's not 100% truth, but I'm forcing myself in that direction. And so, yeah, this is good stuff. I got to have this stuff every day. And thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Tina, I do have one thing I want to mention before I go to Bish. I don't want to forget to mention my sponsor. When I was starting to do my amends, he suggested that I start with something I appreciate in the person that I'm making the amend to, so that if I do that, then I brought the conversation up to a level of love, so that it's easier to go into the rest of it. So I learned, and I even use that when it's not an amend. Let's say I'm having difficulty with someone in the middle of something going on. I'll think, okay, what do I appreciate in this person? And shift it from the negative to the positive. So I don't know if that helps, but that always helps me with mine. Thank you. Bish.
So I'm over here just laughing at myself, because I spent that whole last bit about trying to explain the emptying minds and the filling bodies. And I'm just trying to find the right word so that I desire to seem smart. Like, oh, look at the big brain on Bish. He's got the big vocabulary, trying to find the right word. And I couldn't do it. Right. I'm just like fumbling and then as soon as I shut my gob and lean back, oh, analogy. That was the word I was looking for. As soon as I just step back, everything just comes naturally. And I wanted to be smart. And what happens? Well, I fell flat on my face. And I really didn't, because it just made me smile and made me grin. And I'm just so glad to be here with you guys. Get a little humility, man. I needed that in my life. So thank you.
Thanks, Bish. Before we go, I do want to mention the necessity to be open to selfless action. And when we start with selfless action, it's mixed. A little of it might be for good reasons. This is just me, but a lot of it was not motivation where it needed to be. And as time went on, my motivations became more and more pure by practicing. So, at first it might have been, well, my sponsor told me I needed to pray for other people. So here I go, I'll pray for somebody. It used to be, that to now I have a practice when I go into a meeting, if I'm having difficulty connecting, or I just do this a lot of the time. I'll open my heart to the people that are there, go around the room and open my heart. If you're ever on a business meeting, try this and see if it doesn't work. Or if you have a sales appointment, open my heart to this person. I send them love. How can I be of service to them today? Those three things I use constant. And I go into a meeting or go around each of the people and do that for them. I open my heart. If I say Drew was in a meeting with me, even if I didn't know his name, I just kind of envision him. I open my heart to Drew. I send love to Drew. How can I be of service to Drew today? And I'll use that around for everyone involved. And it's amazing that once I do that, that's a way that I can introduce selfless action, is by opening my heart, by surrendering. See, that's a surrender process. And things really do fall into place when I do that, no matter what it is that we're talking about. Yeah. It's funny, it looks like we'd have 15 or 20 points to how to do the second stanza, right? How we still our mind, how we do, become desireless, all this stuff. When in reality, it's one sentence. It's that last sentence. Actions pure, when actions pure and selfless, everything settles into its own perfect place. So it's much more simple. It's what can I do for you today instead of what you can do for me today. Tina?
I think this third verse is really summed up well in Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, on how to just forget, the names of just how to empty your mind. But one of the things I took from him and how to maybe what I think helps me get into a pure mode is, he says, make everything you do a meditation. If you have to walk up the stairs, let that be the most important thing you're doing. And that kind of takes you out of it kind of brings you back to present, when they talk about what do you see, what do you name 5 things you can hear, smell, all those things to kind of ground you. But I think that making whatever you're doing your meditation, I don't think, because it's not logical to do nothing, like Drew said with the car. You can't always do nothing, but if you do things that are pure and selfless, and you make that your meditation, that's kind of living in the solution. There's a little bit of a solution there that has worked for me. I just wanted to share it.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, it's, if we're buying a car, the way I approach that, it's not, oh, well, when it's the right car, it'll come to me. For me, what I do is, and what I did when I bought this car last year, Drew, I am powerless over what car I need. Thank you that I will be led in the direction of the car I need. I am powerless. I open my heart and I will know when it's the right car that I need. Something like that. Just whatever bubbles up to do with that. And then guess what? I go online and start looking at cars. I have to do some action. It's not that we do nothing. And if it really started bothering me, or if I started getting some anxiety about it, I would ask for someone to be placed in my path that I can pray for, that they find the car they need. And in conversation, somebody will say, oh, I'm looking for a car too. I need to buy one, blah, blah, blah. Or I could pray for the people looking at Auto Trader that they would find the car that they need, even if I didn't know anyone, anything to get the focus off of me. Yeah, that's good. we need to close up, guys. Any other comments? We got to the good stuff there at the end, but it really is selfless action. It really, and opening our heart, and it could be the same, maybe we could say selfless motivation, because a lot of times the actions look the same, whether have a deep selfishness that the actions are coming out of, or a selflessness. Sometimes the behaviors look exactly the same. Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the G word, gratitude.
Yeah.
Like my inner Eeyore, I've got to have that too. I was looking at Paul and I thought about it, and I was like, man, I got to mention that because, sponsees, first thing I say is, have you done your gratitude list? And my sponsor used to say that to me, and he'd say, I'm not, write down 5 things you're grateful for. Call me back in an hour. And man, it would piss me off, and I'd call him back an hour and 10 minutes later, that's like, but yeah, that's important too. It's a good meeting. Thank y'all.
Well, that gratitude, Brian, introduces the higher power into our into our conversation, and into, even though, love was already there, we just couldn't see it. We couldn't see it. Yeah, that's good. Gratitude always does that for me, because gratitude gets me out of the way. So we've got praying for others, we've got gratitude, and just working the steps, is helpful with this, because the steps, what they did was they identified my fears and how to get rid of those fears so I could better allow things to fall into place, so I could learn how to be selfless in small ways. Good. Anything else to add, guys, before we close? Y'all have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use, and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.